Rome called them slaves, but history forgot their rebellion. They weren't just victims. They were the spark that defied an empire. And Rome tried to erase them, but they became the echo. The morning sun rose over Rome, washing the stone streets in gold. The market buzzed with life, traders shouting, coins clinking, and the smell of fresh bread mixing with the sweat of labor. Among the chaos, Livia and Aurelia sold figs from a small basket, their hands rough from work, but their smiles still soft. Suddenly, soldiers marched through, clearing the path for Marcus Varro, a wealthy trader whose eyes scanned the crowd like a hawk. He wasn't looking for goods. He was looking for people. Livia noticed his gaze settle on them. She felt unease crawl up her neck. Varro stopped, smirked, and spoke to the officer. Moments later, chaos erupted. Soldiers grabbed the girls, claiming their father owed taxes. Their cries were drowned by the crowd's noise. Aurelia fought back, shouting, "We are free citizens." But her voice meant nothing against the law of power. They were dragged to a cart filled with others, terrified faces, bound wrists. As the cart rolled away, Livia looked back one last time at the fig basket lying on the ground, a symbol of a life she'd never see again. Dust filled the air as wooden wheels creaked over the rough road. Livia and Aurelia sat chained with others, men, women, and even children. Silence hung heavy, broken only by sobs and the crack of a whip. Marcus Varro rode beside the caravan, counting his new merchandise. His voice was cold, detached. "You are property now," he said, "and property doesn't speak." Aurelia whispered to her sister, "Stay quiet. Stay strong." Livia nodded, tears streaking her face. At night, they rested by a river. Some tried to escape. Arrows found their backs before dawn. The message was clear. Hope was dangerous. Among the guards was Titus, a soldier who hid pity behind his helmet. When Livia stumbled, he pretended not to see. But later, he quietly left a piece of bread near her feet. It was the smallest act of rebellion in a cruel world. The caravan reached the slave market of Capua, a place where freedom was traded for gold. Wooden platforms lined the square, and the crowd gathered. Nobles, merchants, and farmers, all hungry for new servants. Marcus Varro ordered his men to wash the captives and dress them in simple tunics. Livia stood trembling as Varro announced, "Strong young girl, unbroken spirit." The crowd shouted bids. She was sold within minutes. Aurelia tried to reach her, but a soldier pushed her back. They were separated, perhaps forever. As Varro pocketed coins, Livia was handed to a rich noblewoman, Cassia, known for her intelligence and quiet defiance of Roman norms. Cassia's eyes softened when she saw Livia's trembling hands. "You are safe with me," she whispered, words Livia couldn't yet trust. Livia's new world was marble floors and golden lamps, yet she was still a prisoner. Cassia's villa overlooked the Tiber River, peaceful from the outside, but full of whispers inside. Cassia treated her slaves differently. No beatings, no starvation. "You will work, but you will also learn," she said. Livia was confused but grateful. She cleaned, cooked, and watched, learning the manners of the elite. At night, Cassia read scrolls about justice and equality, dangerous ideas for a Roman woman. She noticed Livia's curiosity. "You can read, can't you?" she asked one evening. Livia nodded slowly. Cassia smiled. "Then I will teach you more." Rumors of revolt spread through the city like wildfire. Spartacus had risen in the south, leading slaves to fight for freedom. In Cassia's house, tension grew. Some servants whispered about joining the rebels. Others feared death. Livia listened silently, her heart torn between safety and justice. One night, Titus arrived secretly, now working under Cassia's protection. He told her quietly, "The empire is shaking. People like you and her will pay the price if caught helping slaves." Cassia looked at Livia and said, "If freedom calls, we must decide, live as property or die as people." The next day, soldiers marched outside. Rome was preparing for war, and Livia knew her life was about to change forever. Smoke rose across the horizon like a dark wound in the sky. Word reached Cassia's villa. Spartacus and his army of slaves had destroyed a Roman outpost in the south. Livia overheard the guards whisper. They say thousands are joining him, slaves, farmers, even soldiers tired of war. That night, Cassia gathered her servants. You will hear stories of rebellion, she said calmly. But remember, Rome kills without mercy. Choose wisely. Livia's heart pounded. Could she find Aurelia if she joined a revolt? Was her sister alive? Later, Titus returned from patrol, his armor covered in ash. They're burning everything, he said, and Rome will answer with blood. Livia looked out toward the burning hills. For the first time, she didn't feel fear. She felt rage. A stranger arrived at Cassia's villa under cover of darkness, a scarred woman in torn robes. She whispered Cassia's name and handed her a small piece of cloth. It was Aurelia's shawl. Livia gasped when she saw it. Where did you get this? She asked desperately. The woman replied, Your sister fights with the rebels near Mount Vesuvius. She said, Tell Livia to stay alive. Tears filled Livia's eyes. Aurelia was alive and free. Cassia warned her, If you leave, Rome will brand you as traitor and hunt you. But Livia couldn't sleep that night. The thought of her sister's voice echoing in rebellion called to her louder than fear itself. Before sunrise, Livia made her choice. She packed a small pouch of bread and water. Cassia found her near the gate and said softly, If you go as more than a slave. You go as a Roman who remembers what freedom should mean. Cassia handed her a small bronze pendant, a symbol of her family. This may save you someday, she said. Titus stood by the stables. You'll need a horse, he said, his voice low. Go north at first, then turn south when the road splits. Livia whispered, Why are you helping me? Titus smiled faintly. Because even Rome can't chain the human heart. As the first light broke, Livia rode away, her heart heavy with fear but blazing with purpose. After days of travel, Livia reached a camp deep in the forests near Mount Vesuvius. Fires burned low, and hundreds of former slaves sharpened stolen weapons. A guard challenged her, but when she showed the pendant, a woman stepped forward. Aurelia. The sisters embraced fiercely, their tears mixing with dirt. I thought you were gone, Livia whispered. Aurelia smiled through exhaustion. We all were, until Spartacus gave us a reason to fight. That night, around the campfire, Aurelia introduced her to others, gladiators, farmers, mothers. All had lost something to Rome. Livia looked at their faces and realized freedom wasn't just a dream. It was alive, burning in every scarred hand that gripped a sword. At dawn, Spartacus himself stood before the gathered rebels, tall, scarred, with eyes that carried both fury and compassion. He raised his sword and said, Rome calls us beasts. Let us show them what beasts can do when they remember their souls. Each rebel cut their palm and swore an oath to fight, to protect, and to never kneel again. When it was Livia's turn, her hand shook. Aurelia took it and whispered, For every woman they silenced. Blood fell onto the ground, dark and sacred. In that moment, Livia stopped being a slave. She became a soldier of memory, one whose name history might forget, but whose courage would echo in every heartbeat of freedom. The rebellion spread like wildfire across the countryside, but Rome was waking. General Crassus, the richest man in the empire, took command. His legions moved south with brutal precision, burning villages that had given shelter to the rebels. From the hills, Livia and Aurelia watched columns of smoke rise. They're coming, Aurelia said. We have to move fast. Spartacus gathered his leaders. We fight where we stand, he declared. We're not ghosts hiding in caves. That night, Livia helped the wounded, children and old women among them. She looked at her sister, sword in hand, and whispered, We're not soldiers. Aurelia answered, No, we're survivors. The drums of Rome echoed through the valley as dawn broke. At sunrise, horns blared across the hills. The rebels, armed with farming tools and stolen swords, faced rows of Roman shields. Livia stayed behind the line, tending to the injured. But when Aurelia fell to her knees after a strike, Livia ran forward, screaming her name. She grabbed a fallen sword and swung wildly, her fear turning into fury. The world became sound and dust, the clash of steel, the smell of blood. When the fighting ended, the ground was red. The Romans had retreated, but at a cost. Too many rebels lay still. Aurelia was alive, barely. Livia pressed her sister's wound. "You can't die," she whispered. "We haven't won yet." Victory was short-lived. Crassus, cunning and ruthless, built a massive trench and wall to trap the rebels between mountains and the sea. Food ran out. Hunger and fear began to poison the camp. Some whispered of surrender. Others plotted to escape. Spartacus stood before them, eyes hollow but voice strong. "Rome builds walls to cage lions. We will break through or die standing." Livia saw Aurelia's strength fading. "We can't survive like this," she said. Aurelia smiled weakly. "Then let's die free." That night, in freezing wind, the rebels filled part of the trench with bodies and broken wagons and stormed through. It was madness. It was hope. Days later, exhausted and starving, the rebels found a merchant caravan. The leader offered food and passage. Desperation blinded them. That night, Roman soldiers ambushed their camp. It was a trap. Aurelia fought fiercely, cutting through soldiers before being struck down. Livia screamed, dragging her sister away, blood soaking her hands. She looked into Aurelia's fading eyes. "Stay with me." Aurelia smiled faintly. "You're free now, little sister. Don't waste it." When morning came, the rebellion was shattered. Spartacus vanished into legend. Livia buried her sister beneath an olive tree, whispering, "For every forgotten woman, I'll remember." The war was over. Rome lined the Appian Way with crucified rebels, 6,000 bodies, warning the world what defiance cost. Livia, disguised as a traveler, walked that road. Her heart broke with each face she passed. She found Aurelia's sword among the ruins and took it as a relic of memory. In the distance, she saw Cassia, arrested for aiding slaves, being taken to Rome in chains. Their eyes met, no words, only understanding. Livia whispered, "They think we're gone, but stories live longer than empires." She turned north, walking toward the unknown, a survivor carrying the fire of 1,000 forgotten women. Weeks passed. Livia wandered north, hiding beneath a worn cloak. The scars of war stretched across the land. Burnt farms, empty villages, silence where laughter once lived. One evening, she found shelter in a small shrine abandoned by priests. There, she met other survivors, an old man missing an arm, a child who had lost her parents. None spoke much. Livia shared what little food she had and told them stories of Aurelia, of Spartacus, of freedom. For the first time, they smiled. When she lay to rest, she whispered to herself, "I survived to remember." Outside, crows flew over the silent fields, messengers of death, but also of rebirth. Far from Rome, hidden in the woods, whispers spread of a secret refuge, a place where escaped slaves and widows live free. Livia followed those whispers. After days of travel, she found it, a small community built around a waterfall, women working, children laughing, men guarding the forest paths. A woman approached her, Nerissa, a former noble who had left Rome behind. "We build here what they destroyed," she said. Livia joined them, helping teach young girls to read and write, lessons Cassia had once given her. In this hidden village, no one was property. They were family. Years passed. Livia grew older, her hair streaked with silver. But Rome did not forget. Soldiers came searching for fugitives, burning sanctuaries one by one. When word reached them that Cassia was executed in Rome, Livia felt the old anger return. One night, she stood by the waterfall, staring into the moonlit water. "They killed my sister. They killed Cassia. But they cannot kill the story," she whispered. Nerissa placed a hand on her shoulder. "Then let the story become the weapon." That night, Livia began to write, not of kings or generals, but of the forgotten women of Rome. The The scrolls Livia wrote became sacred among the free people. She called them the Book of the Forgotten. Inside were names, not just of rebels, but of mothers, sisters, and daughters lost to Rome's cruelty. She wrote about Aurelia's courage, Cassia's kindness, and the spark that could never be buried. Travelers carried her writings across provinces, disguised as trade goods. Soon, whispers reached even the slaves in Roman villas. The story lives. Though Rome tried to destroy every trace, the words spread like wind. Unstoppable, invisible, eternal. Livia smiled as she wrote the last line. Freedom begins when we are remembered. In Rome, decades later, senators whispered of a mysterious book spreading unrest among slaves and women. It glorifies rebellion, they said. It must be destroyed. But every copy they burned, two more appeared. Even noble women began to quote lines from the Book of the Forgotten. A young scholar presented one copy before the Senate. It is written by a woman named Livia, he said. She was once a slave. The senators went silent. Rome, the greatest empire on earth, was afraid of a woman's words. Somewhere far from the city, Livia, now old and frail, looked toward the rising sun and whispered, "Then we have already won." The sun rose gently over the sanctuary. Livia, now old and weak, sat beneath the olive tree where she had buried Aurelia years ago. Children from the village gathered around her, begging, "Tell us the story again, about the sisters who defied Rome." She smiled softly, then listened carefully, for memory is a kind of rebellion too. Her voice trembled, but her eyes still burned with fire. She spoke of slavery, freedom, and the price of courage. When she finished, the children were silent, not out of sadness, but awe. As the morning light touched her face, Livia closed her eyes and whispered, "Aurelia, Cassia, we're free now." The wind stirred the olive leaves, almost like a reply. After Livia's death, the people of the sanctuary mourned for days. They built a small shrine beside the waterfall and placed her scrolls inside. Nerissa, now gray-haired herself, said, "We will guard her words, not as relics, but as weapons." Travelers came from distant lands to copy her writings. They carried them to Gaul, Greece, even Egypt. Everywhere, whispers grew, not of Rome's might, but of Rome's sins. Livia's name became a quiet legend, not celebrated by emperors, but carried by mothers who refused to let their daughters be silenced again. Years later, in the marble halls of Rome, a young noblewoman named Octavia found an old scroll hidden behind a statue. She read through the night, the story of Livia and Aurelia, of rebellion and hope. When her father, a senator, discovered her reading, he shouted, "That book is forbidden." Octavia looked him in the eye and said, "Then perhaps it's the only truth we have." That night, she secretly copied the scroll and sent it to others, servants, teachers, widows. The story of the forgotten women of Rome lived again, carried by one who had everything but longed for meaning. Time moved forward. Empires rose and fell, but the whispers continued. Centuries later, Roman law began to shift. Some masters freed their slaves. Temples opened schools for women. Philosophers began to speak of equality, small sparks of change born from one woman's defiance long ago. No one remembered Livia's face, but her words remained carved in secret places. Freedom begins when we are remembered. On the old Appian Way, travelers still left flowers beneath olive trees for the nameless rebels who refused to kneel. Centuries later, the ruins of Rome stood quiet. Tourists and scholars walked its empty streets, unaware that beneath their feet lay the stories of those who once dared to rise. A modern historian brushed dust from an ancient tablet. Faint letters appeared, the same words written long ago by Livia. They tried to erase us, but we became the echo. She smiled and whispered, "You are not forgotten." In that moment, time folded, and the voices of Aurelia, Cassia, and Livia seemed to whisper through the stones. We lived, we fought, and we endured. The forgotten women of Rome were forgotten no more. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit the like button, Subscribe to the channel. Every store beats with a lesson. For more amazing history stories, and tell us in the comments what you thought about this video. Thank you for watching. See you next one.